Welcome to Your Health Reset, where we address the real root causes behind health issues today to get you rapid results on your health journey so you can be who you came here to be, mind, body, and spirit. I'm your host, Sinclair Keneally, survivor of complex chronic illness, expert on resolving root causes, and co-founder of Detox, Rejuvenation, and Meditation RX. Let's get started. Welcome back to another interview with me, your host, Sinclair Keneally. And today I am joined by my dear friend and someone I would consider a personal mentor, Michael Fessler. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you, Sinclair. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I want people to know because I think of you as sort of a best kept secret in the world of actually treating root causes, you and Liz and your company. And we use your products and people are often surprised to discover them. You really are a flown under the radar, but we're going to no more. And I know you guys are already growing at an insane rate, but I really want to highlight what contribution you've made to the community in terms of addressing heavy metals and doing it safely and actually pulling them out through the skin instead of forcing the detoxification to only go primarily through the gut, which can have its own issues and stressors.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and of course, you were one of our mentors for, you introducing us to OligoScan and that French technology of how to accurately assess our body burden of metals, including the nanonized versions of them. It's something that, labs can't pick up as successfully. So that's really interesting. So anyway, all that I will stop talking. What we're spending a lot of time talking about is chronic conditions and, inflammatory responses that actually can be traced back to the gut. But what causes the gut to be thrown into a state of chronic distress? It's these root causes that we need to understand more, and we need to ask that of our practitioners as well.
I always, when I discuss something, I compare it to about taking your car in and having it repaired. And so we know we bring in, the mechanic will set it up on a diagnostic machine. They'll look at the intake, how's the engine performing, but they'll look at the exhaust and make sure that catalytic converter, everything's performing. If it doesn't, it'll be smoking, it'll put off different gases and everything. So when you look at the stomach, we have to actually look at what is causing these issues in the gut. And one of the relatively unknown areas are the lymphatic system, the lymph nodes that are connected to the intestines and around the liver. And today we live with a lot of processed foods. We live with a lot of medications. People want a quick fix. And so these lifestyle changes tend to form a problem in the intestines because they're overwhelmed. So these lymph nodes get backed up. They can't filter the contaminants. One of the contaminants that I found, the same thing that I found in the armpit, was the aluminum. Just to come off the road a little bit on this one, divert, is that when we first made the nighttime detox deodorant, and it's made out of seaweed, it attracted the aluminum out of the body. Even though somebody doesn't use aluminum, we found that so much aluminum is coming out of the underarm. In the same way that when we attended a lot of aluminum conferences, we were able to get these sources of where aluminum is coming from, what foods. Corn and wheat were one of the highest sources of aluminum. And what happens is similar to when you take it in, it has no biological benefit. And so it's in food dyes, it's in antacids, it's even in aspirin, and it's very heavy in processed foods. But when you put it into the stomach, it hits the lymph nodes become inflamed. And the element of aluminum has an astringent nature to it. Just like the armpit, it will collapse the sweat duct, so water can't get through it. In the same way, when your gut gets a little aluminum in it, it's like yeast in bread. It just expands and it affects the whole tissue. So what we have like a caking. So it dries out the intestines like aluminum's used in a tortilla, or it's used in bread and baking powder. And it starts to filter to the lymph node. It just calcifies. And so the body's not able to metabolize the food, and you get this buildup of bloating. And people recognize, but they don't understand that their lymph nodes are trying to filter salt. And for an example, when you go to a theater and you have a lot of popcorn with salt on it, you feel bloated because you had too much, you have too much salt. Well, these are your lymph nodes and it's taking time to filter out. But the issue is when it's aluminum, it starts to dry out the intestines. It starts to actually affect the fluid. So when we talk to somebody and they tell us, well, I only eliminate once or once every 2 days, we have a problem in the intestines. So in other words, the intestines are drying out and they effectively are drying all the way out to, into the colon. And we found out with the scan, they accumulate heavy metals.
Mm-hmm.
And so these heavy metals just keep drying up and they have no place to go. And so now they back up into the liver. And so the liver, it tends up to, once that backs up, it's not able to digest the food. And so we see a lot of people bloating. And when you affect this whole system, high blood pressure comes in and they run to the doctor and they start getting on medications and they end up spending $800-900, even more, for a no-end medication. And there's no end to that. And so we try to present a way with what we call the belly fat freedom cream. And we use cosmetic names because it keeps us away from making claims that might bring in some sort of drug claim. But
Mm-hmm.
how this works is that once your stomach is impacted, the cream you wear at night, it's a stronger salt than what's in the aluminum. And in it, it's the kelp, the iodine. And the cells, what happens, the young adults have practically 450 lymph nodes in their body. 250 of them are around the intestinal area. That's a lot of lymph nodes to have inflamed and everything. So as aluminum gets into the tissue, it just doesn't leave. It sits in the tissue and something has to move it out. And so we found by introducing a stronger salt in the form of kelp over the surface of the stomach, we can vasodilate those sweat ducts, the 5 to 6 million sweat ducts, and a lot of them in the belly, that what happens, they have collapsed because the aluminum salt coming to the surface has dried out the sweat ducts. So it keeps, just like an antiperspirant, the stomach is not sweating out through the skin. And so we vasodilate and we do a sodium osmotic exchange that allows these toxicants, the aluminum, to come to the surface. And with the coriander seed, it binds it so it doesn't retract. But the cells are so smart that they will attract the iodine, the stronger salt. That's what it wants. It will take the better salt than the weaker salt. But because we eat processed foods and sodas, we just compound this problem. So we found by the exhaust system with the mechanics that by improving that, it helps diffuse the salts out of the intestines to the surface. It's a form of the body that makes it sweat. Many people stop sweating, as you've seen on the scan. It's that when they stop sweating, they accumulate heavy metals. And this is a characteristic of why they don't eliminate as well as they do. And we found that when they do use the paste at nighttime, that we can get them to 3-4 times a day to have elimination. So when we look at elderly people, a lot of them have dried colons and it gets inflamed. And that's how a lot of elderly people in their lives. And so by introducing the kelp, the salt, it keeps the lymph nodes and the intestines moist so that the food can be more metabolized through the liver. And being that we cover the liver area also, it gets rid of the inflammation in the liver and it helps with all sorts of things. It helps with the vitamin D. It helps with the assimilation of zinc. If you have a stomach problem, or if you ate something and you're sneezing or you're having a lot of issues, it's probably from the contaminations in the food. So we try to promote where these sources of aluminum are coming from, but we know that eating organically, staying away from medications, that we can live a much better life and have a much better digestive system.
You've just said so many important things. I just want to pause and unpack a few of them because you just explained in such a beautiful way. I've never heard anybody help connect these dots in such a simple and also profound and complex way all at the same time. So we're talking about intestinal health not being isolated. Yes, we have the effect of toxins on intestinal health. And yes, that has a domino effect outward, but you have to see intestinal health, the actual intestinal tract, and the relationship between that and the lymph nodes surrounding it, and the relationship between both of those elements with the liver. And it actually is like a triangle of flow that needs to be restored, which, yes, you can do through intestinal support, but it's gentle and safe and profound to actually draw it out through the skin to these disruptive elements, such as aluminum and these other toxins.
N- And there is actually a recent study that shows the axis between the liver, the intestines, and the brain.
Hmm.
So that imagine the liver is your car filter, but you can't pull out the car filter. You only have one. So when we can topically detox the liver, it helps with the circulation to the whole body. And it helps the brain. The brain is connected to the liver and the intestine. What you eat, people get sluggish and they've been eating processed foods, be it as it may, they're just not knowing what the intake is.
Hmm.
And with the Eluca scan, we can find out if they are mineral deficient, but it's the aluminum factor that we need to eliminate from our diet.
Yeah. And I think it's so important that you point out that the two foods being corn and wheat being the highest concentration of aluminum, because we think of aluminum as like, okay, that's what we're storing our food in. Well, that's not too bad, as it must be shelf stable. Well, not necessarily. And then people get smarter and realize, oh, we don't want aluminum in our deodorants. Great, fix that problem. That's done, right? Oh, we have aluminum in baking soda. Well, I'll just get the aluminum free kind. But we're actually talking about everyday staples being massively contaminated. We really are living in the aluminum age, aren't we?
It is. It's the industrial world, and our lymphatic system has not genetically evolved to accept this. And so when we have a gut problem and we're not able to diffuse the salts through the intestines and through the lymphatic system, high blood pressure builds up. And this will back up into the kidney. I mean, you only have to palpate them. And I know their lymphatic system is affected. And when you start to fix their intestinal issues, all these internal lymphatic fluids, by way of gravity, because we live on the planet Earth, are descending down to the lower extremities. When you fix the gut, you've got to fix where the fluids are going. So the bottom of the feet, when they're dried out, that means same thing in your gut. The metals have dried out the feet and they're not permeating. So this can back all the way up. Fascinating. The lymphatic system is not taught in medical school. They don't have the diagnostics to understand it, and they don't look at heavy metals. And so that's why we have so many pharmaceutical companies and the media. If they had the solution, we wouldn't be having this meeting today.
It's a really good point. When I teach people about the, cracked soles and dried feet as a sign of, aluminum heavy metal toxicity, and what we're going to do is use topicals for it, their minds are always blown, Michael. And you taught me that.
Well, I look at the heavy metals, but aluminum as what aluminum is to human, kryptonite was to Superman. It has no biological benefit in her body, and it's not regulated, and it's in food dyes, it's in so many different things. And we could spend all day long going over the food sources. I've been collecting these sources for 20 years, working with aluminum scientists. It's showing up all over the place. What didn't have it, what does have it. So the antacids are full of it, aspirin, but people still cook in Reynolds aluminum. And I tell them, just put parchment paper and cover it so you don't get that. In fact, I had a lady that I told her about aluminum pans. And so she went to the next town and went to a dozen restaurants plus. They were all cooking out of aluminum. And when you cook a red sauce, an acid, like a tomato in an aluminum pan, it just multiplies the amount of aluminum coming out of that. When we work with an individual, we try in our questionnaire, we tried to find out where the sources of heavy metals are coming from. If you live next to a cement factory, they waft a whole lot of aluminum's used in cement to bind it, just like tortillas, just flour tortillas. It just goes on and on. So our belly cream, our belly fat freedom is able to help flush out and to keep it moving. As long as you keep aluminum moving out of your body, you're okay. When you stop sweating and aluminum now gets into the inactive channels of the skin. So what it does, it prevents the metals from sweating out. So when somebody says, I'm not sweating, you just look at the bottom of their foot and you can tell why. It's all dry and callous. And so that's where we introduce our products to topically address this. And then they can go into a sauna or whatever. But you can see on the Oligoscan that when I took it apart and I started looking what aluminum was doing to the cell, it was actually increasing the sodium on the cell. It was depleting the magnesium and shortening the potassium. So when we start to look at a scan, I can see the influence of aluminum on an individual, but it's worldwide. So it's
so interesting.
So we look at, part of my background was working in economics. I worked with statistics, but I also learned micro and macro. And I learned how to do comparisons from my uncle, who was the first NASA scientist to study the moon rocks. And I said, well, what's the deal with the moon rocks? And he said, don't laugh. We had nothing compared on Earth because it's so full of contaminants and radiation. But the moon rocks were allowed, and they're still stored today, that no air gets to them, so they can still study them. But he said, now we could set the parameters for the spectrometry. And that's what the Oligoscan is, a NASA, style thing that people can take advantage of. And it hasn't hit the medical world. They don't understand it yet. So that's why I looked at the Oligoscan as a real way to investigate an individual, because if there's no change on their Oligoscan the second time around, I know they're not compliant. They haven't changed their lifestyle. And the other one is that thermography now is becoming an important tool for me to interpret for clinics, because I'm starting to see not only that gut, but sometimes they can have a C-section or they can have a hernia mesh, and that incision has affected the lymphatic system also.
Can you say more about that and interference fields, how that would disrupt lymph flow and lead to additional stagnation?
Of course, it's really important that the scar tissue from either a knee, something in the knee, or something in the bottom foot, they stepped on a nail, any type of injury in their whole life sometimes can affect the draining of the lymphatics. So surgeries cut into their lymphatics. So we actually have to use these pastes, these creams, what I call the healing salts, and the belly fat freedom. We actually use that in other parts besides the belly, and we run it up the lymphatic system. First area that I always see blocked is the inner knee. So if you can grab the inside of the inner knee and fill that fluid, that means either the bottom of the feet are blocked or you're retaining fluid. And so it's like a tourniquet around the knee, and there's this edema in the thighs. And nobody likes edema in the thighs because it's just not fair.
Michael, I have to out you a little bit, because when we met at a conference many years ago, we were talking about the technology in your products, and I was really interested, and I was still sick. I'd come a long way, but I really wasn't well yet. And you looked at the shape of my body and you said, does it hurt right here? And you showed me where to poke on the inside of the knee, right, and a point on the ankle and a point on the hip. And I said, yeah. And you pointed to the shape of my body. You said, you have lymph stagnation from your heavy metals still. I said, no, I don't. I've been working on detoxification. I have SIBO. And you said, maybe, but you've also have lymph stagnation. So
this goes back to my training, because I worked with a neurosurgeon, and I was his assistant in Los Angeles for 23 years. And he taught me how to look for anomalies in the skin. And so I had just enough training that I was able to overlap with my products, working with a neurosurgeon, to put these pieces together. And if I had specialized in one area, I would never discovered this. And by the way, I did ask permission. I always do. That's why I like people to understand how they can self-manage these issues, that because nobody pays attention to the skin enough. And so these bulges, like even in the thyroid, if there's a bulge, I know that they might be using an underarm deodorant that's not letting the thyroid to drain.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to mention another very interesting thing for your audience. And this is if they've been staying on and listening to this, that recently in Spain, they came up with a study on autopsies of the cadavers of COVID patients. And they found out that in the liver and the intestines, elevated amounts of ammonia. And I found out also that they find in breast cancer, elevated amounts of ammonia. So the one thing that we find on the scan, and I'm sure you see this all the time, Sinclair, is the absence of zinc. Zinc is low. It allows the cadmium to come in and infiltrate. And in the tumors, they find a lot of cadmium and aluminum. And so now we know during COVID time, they had been pushing the zinc, but nobody knew why. So ammonia causes decay. It's from processed food. It's from the decay that's not working through the intestines and the liver. And so it's elevated, but zinc kills the ammonia. And our products help move the decay through the system. So that's a real find for me, that we can help people. And we've had a lot of people come in and said, I've been to all these doctors and you're telling me that I'm low in zinc. And so I have to, just like palpation, I started on the protocol, and zinc is so important for getting rid of heavy metals. If you got low zinc, you're not going to, and in vegetarians, most of them we find are very low on zinc. And so they accumulate heavy metals. So there's a lot, a lot on this onion to peel apart. And I apologize, but I'd like to cover a lot of things because it relates to people in all different areas, their friends or families. And so
I think so many people, please continue. So many people are listening to this going, wait a minute, like that was a big aha moment for me. Why did I get so much more sick than my sisters? Well, I was the one that was vegetarian the longest and the earliest, my middle sister as well. But, I really crashed because I did not know how to handle nutrition appropriately as a vegetarian and not create long-term health consequences for myself.
Look at one simple element, zinc. And once you get zinc on board, you can start moving the other heavy metals. Without zinc, it's such a vital element in our body. Just want to make sure I didn't miss it. Oh, to start the good flora. A lot of people use commercial toothpaste. It's full of aluminum. So I ask people, get a bag and get baking soda and get kelp salt or sea salt, mix it together half and brush your teeth with that. Because that will help the gums and that helps the right gastric juices to develop in the stomach. The other one, we're all low on iodine. And if you just eat a piece of seaweed every day, mix it in your oatmeal, mix it in your salad, whatever, and you chew it, it helps the gums. It starts to get rid of the bad bacteria in the gums, and it sets the stage for good flora, good bacteria in the stomach. So the oral bacteria makes a big difference, especially if we've got a lot of amalgams and other dental issues we haven't taken care of. So I just... But
we think it's over and we don't need to do anything else once we did get them out.
Yeah, well, we still need to detox. The aluminum smelter plants around the world are wafting uncontrolled, and they actually atmospherically get into snow-capped mountains. He loves water. And then in the summer, when it melts, the evidence is gone. Now it's into the lakes. It's used for irrigation. And so we're it. Now we're getting doses. And what it does organically, when you have a lot of aluminum in corn and wheat, that displaces the nutritional value. So in other words, all around the world, the magnesium is being depleted in our plants around the world because of aluminum.
It's such an important point. So many people wonder why that's happening and they fail to make that connection.
Yeah. So that's why when people say, what's the difference between organic and regular? I said a lot. Just pick a piece of celery, organic versus other, and see the green and the yellow in the other one. Do you want to spend $800-900 on medications, or do you want to eat right and at a fraction of the change of just eating correctly? And in the 90s, I was with Dr. Blaine, and he was talking to a nutritional expert, and she said that, you only have to have one garbage meal, processed meal, and it takes 30 days to get through your system.
Wow. I think that's an important thing for people to understand. And I also question if it's even longer if you already have stagnation and chronic inflammation.
It probably stays longer because there are some medications that once you start taking, it takes 90 days for the effects to wear off. And here's the other part about how important that liver and the kidney is. We're seeing a lot of liver and kidney backup from medications because the drug companies are supposed to show, does it clear the liver? Does it clear and they use mice studies. That's not us. So a lot of these medications are just showing up in the liver and compounding in the kidneys. And that's when you can start to see high blood pressure start to build up. And then, it's a continuation to go there. So
I've got a question for you about that, Michael, because I know that aluminum is used in pharmaceuticals to help create certain behaviors, and fluoride is also used widely in pharmaceuticals to help with the delivery mechanism to the cell. Can you explain the relationship between fluoride and heavy metals and detox? Because people don't really know how to think about how fluoride fits into this.
Yeah, we see a lot of fluoride from people using those Teflon pans.
Yeah.
It does affect the gut. They use aluminum a lot of times for marking the drug, but they use it in vaccines and they use it acetaminophen or antacid because it breaks the brain barrier. It can get into the cell. It's a salting in, salting out. And what the cell does is that when it gets into the cell, to get rid of it, uses calcium. It uses intracellular calcium to try to dump it out of the system. Now it's extracellular because remember we were talking about how calcium and aluminum bind together. Now it's in the lymphatic system. Now the lymphatic system's overwhelmed, but if it can't get out through the skin, it's just circulating. And now we can have, and the cardiologists, I've just recently read where the cardiologists are now starting to understand aluminum and the depletion of calcium, how it affects the heart. So the kryptonite, the aluminum is a real thing, and that I would, when they come visit you, I want them to find out what they're eating, how to avoid aluminum. City water, there was a naturopath I was working on a clinical, and he came from the Midwest, and he had all these breakouts around his mouth. And I was telling a group about how the city waters can affect the flora and it can show breakouts around the mouth. And he said, when I came to Seattle, I noticed I had all this breakout. And so when I see somebody with a lot of facial issues, I go, we want to address the gut. There's something going on. Now, a lot of people can have parasites and other things. So when you have these heavy metals stuck in the liver and the gut, you're going to try parasites and other bugs. The bugs love heavy metals. So you get rid of the heavy metals and the aluminum, you're going to reduce the amount of bugs. You want the good bugs in there.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point for people because a lot of our practice is taken up with people who are experiencing extreme liver stagnation. And, they come to us for gallstones and for, fatty liver, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, things like that. And they are shocked to find out that they also have parasites. And it's a whole thing for them to, accept that this could have happened to them because they didn't grow, live in the tropics. They don't, vacation there, or it's been years, or how did I get access to these parasites? And the question is not, how did I get exposed to them? It's what made my body the perfect environment for them to set up shop, right? And it all comes back to this, right?
Yeah. And the first thing I tell an individual, even though you're going to kill off the bugs, they're going to go through your lymphatic system. So you have to get your lymphatic system and skin to detox first. It's we're the trash people. we teach doctors and practitioners how to teach their patients how to remove the trash. It is so important. And the nice part is that we're starting to see a lot of people getting off their meds because it was the lymphatic system that they start to understand and they self-manage. And also you have to look at our medical system is overwhelmed right now with bags up in cases and everything. So before you go see a doctor or get any tests, detoxification is like brushing your teeth and showering before you go in and get a test. Just to give you an idea, if you have a lot of heavy metals and you're going to get a mammogram, it's going to cause a problem in the breast because that's where the radiation is going to be absorbed into. So the same thing with the gut. If you have gut problems and a lot of heavy metals, and you get an MRI or any type of X-ray, you're going to try to even get things even worse.
Such good points, connecting all these dots for folks. I get so excited when we use your products and our clients get so happy because they're like, I just can't get rid of these. I feel like so many of them say, I feel like I'm living in a sleeping bag of flesh that's not mine.
I get asked all the time, when can I get off this detox? And I said, well, when airplanes stop flying, cars stop driving. And because a lot of us live in the big city and we're around a lot of pollution. And so the detoxification, it's such an expanding field and there's so many people getting results. It's an exciting place to be, this air right now.
I totally agree with you. And I love that you're a big part of helping people understand that detox is a lifestyle, not an event, and that we can absolutely reclaim our brilliant body's ability to self-heal if we just help get the stuff out of the way that's interrupting it.
I've got one other thing is that they found bacteria in our village here where I live in Port Ludlow, and they added chlorine to the system. And so they, you can smell it in the water. We've had to switch to bring cooking with water and everything else and starting to put water filters on. Finally got my digestive system back in order the way it used to be. People don't realize that the chlorinated water, city water, can really affect and kill the flora inside the gut. And so sometimes it's an expense that, do you want to have a dried out system or do you want to have a system that works? And so, but it's really funny to me that we have mechanics all across this country that can solve cars, but we don't have doctors that can solve the digestive issue, that you can drive in, what's going on with my gut? Why am I not eliminating? And can tell you a straight up answer how to fix it.
Such a good point. Boy, you are just bursting bubbles. I love talking to you. Do you have any last piece of advice for our listeners? I'll tell you, we have a range of folks listening into the summit who are just starting out at really taking, control over their own health instead of waiting for somebody in a white coat to fix it. And then we have our really advanced students, I'll call them, who've been gluten-free. They do all the things right. They eat organic and they still are struggling with their health. So we got a range of folks here.
The one thing we have individuals do is the first thing we do to detox is get in a bathtub with a cup or two of Epsom salt and start to get the sweating going through the body. If you're not sweating, find out why. Come in and get tested. See if it's the zinc. See if your body is blocked by aluminum and heavy metals. And because once we do an Aloga scan and we got a baseline, we can see how the body's changing. And people feel better. And the other part is that when we do a lymphatic drainage, after a while, people can start to pick things off the floor where they couldn't before. They can start to exercise better. If you're one that is stuck, some of these elderly people, we need to address this problem with the elderly. They're not fed the right food. They're not mobilized. And so I've known that the topical approach can really help with moving the salts out of their body. But
it's a perfect approach because it's so safe for kiddos, for the seriously chronically ill. Like, we get very sensitive people in our practice, and everybody tolerates your products really well.
Oh, that's good. Well, the aluminum causes arcing in the cell. So that's where it causes a lot of irritation. So that's why we teach if people just poke in certain areas on their body, they know they're having a problem that And they need to address that because they drain, our bodies drain through the hands, the bottom of the feet, and the armpits and the scalp. And so if it's not draining and they're dried out, there's a reason for that.
Yeah, it really blew my mind after using your product that first night, and I woke up with my hips in less pain. And I was used to just unlivable fibromyalgia that had, calmed down quite a bit when I changed a lot of things. And like I said, when I met you, I was midstream, but I was just shocked because I thought I was going to have to be stuck with it. We think of these things as structural issues, but they don't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah. It's the exhaust system on the car. It's not, nobody examines the trash. And I know we can look at the stools and the urine, but the lymphatics are the main thing for getting rid of heavy metals. That's the main way they come out. Aluminum comes out through the skin. That's the main source. It comes out more than that's Chris Exley's study on. But what he didn't do, and I have to mention this, he did it with a lot of college kids. He did it with the elderly people because when they stop sweating, that's when the elderly, their shoulders go forward because they've been punched in the liver, that dryness of the liver. So we can address, light bulbs, right. And nobody is, we need to bring this to the mainstream, but it's very difficult to fight against the money that's used for advertising, the brainwashing that goes across this country until people are going to get stuck in a wheelchair. I'm trying to keep us all out of a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I applaud you and Michael for your support and your success because, I'm just a part of it, but trash is pretty important to get out of the body.
Thank you so much, Michael. We love working with you and Liz, and we just love everything that you stand for. Thanks for being so generous with your time and your wisdom today.
The interview, I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Check the notes, guys. You'll find where you can find Michael Fessler. Thanks for listening. Go to detoxrejuvenation.com to find the links in the show notes to everything we covered in this episode. Please subscribe, review, and share with other humans who need this precious information. Let's help each other. Until next time, love, Sinclair.